Hi all, Nadine here. So today is gonna be today I'm doing all right. So yay! And I'm gonna be doing up a couple of aminals. I think I'm gonna try. We'll see. Like a low poly kind of stylized little aminal little guy. And we'll see how that works. I think I moved things around the wrong way. Yes, I did. I should have moved that over there and had that over there. But that's okay. Whatever. Whatever. We'll deal with it when it comes. It's just because I'm looking the wrong way at the camera. Or not at the camera, I guess. Whichever way. Whatever way works. Whatever way doesn't work, I don't know. So yeah. Oh, my camera's a little high. Oops. Green screen, I have set that up again. I should do that now. I'll do that right now. Let's see. Anybody here yet? Is there anybody up there? Filters. Chroma key. Woo 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 woo. Ooh, look at that. I guess I should have a little background with the way I've got it set up. Add a color source and the background. Okay. Oop, a little too much. A little too much. I just need it behind me. And oops, that's my face. Do 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 do. Oops, up one. There we go. Yay! Now it's just me. Yay! Let's see. Hide that. There we go. It'll do. It'll do. So anybody here yet? So we're doing more. We're doing more of the Blender because I can't get my hand camera working with the face camera, and it's kind of annoying the living daylights out of me. It's just too blurry. It just comes up blurry, and it's just like, oh, what do you do? What do you do? Them are the important questions. Them are the important questions. I wonder if I can get this below the screen. Sort of maybe. Boom, 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 boom. Eek, doop. There, good enough. Close enough for the guys I go out with. And what I have here is I've actually remoted. I've got my laptop going. Excuse me. I've got my laptop going. And I've got Blender on my laptop. And I remoted to my laptop with TeamViewer. And it seems to be less of a problem with the OBS running. Hi, Steven. How are you doing? You were my tweet of my person of the day, or every other day, I guess. I don't know when I have everybody scheduled for. I have got a lot of people rescheduled to go out. You're welcome. I'm happy to do that. Let's see. File. So I have someone here listening. So I'm gonna quit waiting and start playing the book. It's I'm still working on Grimm's fairy tale. It's you just don't know how
The Water of Life.
you just don't know how long that one is until you um start going through it. Holy cow. Oops, I made a little mistake. View. Docs. And look at I do not need to see this scenes or the sources. I just need to see oh no, I do need to see the scenes in a source. I need to see the scenes. And I need to see the mixer. And I do not need to see the controls. There, because, oh, it won't let me. Because I need to be able to turn down the volume for this thing. In case I've got it turned up. Okay. Sorry about that. Yay. Okay, so, okay, mute me.
The Water of Life, from Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. Long before you and I were born, there reigned in a country a great way off a king who had 3 sons. The king once fell very ill, so ill that nobody thought he could live. His sons were very much grieved at their father's sickness, and as they were walking together very mournfully in the garden of the palace, a little old man met them and asked what was the matter. They told him that their father was very ill, and that they were afraid nothing could save him. "I know what would," said the little old man. "It is the water of life. If he could have a draught of it, he would be well again. But it is very hard to get." Then the eldest one said, "I shall find it." And he went to the sick king, and begged that he might go and search for the water of life, as it was the only thing that could save him. "No," said the king, "I had rather die than place you in such great danger as you must meet with in your journey." But he begged so hard that the king let him go, and the prince thought to himself, "If I bring my father this water, he will make me sole heir to his kingdom." Then he set out, and when he had gone on his way some time, he came to a deep valley, overhung with rocks and woods. And as he looked around, he saw standing above him on one of the rocks a little ugly dwarf, with a sugar-loaf cap and a scarlet cloak. And the dwarf called to him and said, "Prince, whither so fast?" "What is that to thee, you ugly imp?" said the prince haughtily, and rode on. But the dwarf was enraged at his behavior, and laid a fairy spell of ill luck upon him, so that as he rode on, the mountain pass became narrower and narrower, and at last the way was so straitened that he could not go a step forward. And when he thought to have turned his horse round and go back the way he came, he heard a loud laugh ringing round him, and found that the path was closed behind him, so that he was shut in all around. He next tried to get off his horse and make his way on foot, but again the laugh rang in his ears, and he found himself unable to move a step, and thus he was forced to abide spellbound. Meantime the old king was lingering on in daily hope of his son's return, till at last the second son said, "Father, I will go in search of the water of life." For he thought to himself, "My brother is surely dead, and the kingdom will fall to me if I find the water." The king was at first very unwilling to let him go, but at last yielded to his wish. So he set out, and followed the same road which his brother had done, and met with the same elf, who stopped him on the same spot in the mountains, saying, as before, "Prince, whither so fast?" "Mind your own affairs, busybody," said the prince scornfully, and rode on. But the dwarf put the same spell upon him as he put on his elder brother, and he too was at last obliged to take up his abode in the heart of the mountains. Thus it is with proud, silly people, who think themselves above every one else, and are too proud to ask or take advice. When the second prince had thus been gone a long time, the youngest son said he would go and search for the water of life, and trusted he would soon be able to make his father well again. So he set out, and the dwarf met him too at the same spot in the valley, among the mountains, and said, "Prince, whither so fast?" And the prince said, "I am going in search of the water of life, because my father is ill and like to die. Can you help me? Pray be kind and aid me if you can." "Do you know where it is to be found?" asked the dwarf. "No," said the prince, "I do not. Pray tell me if you know." "Then, as you have spoken to me kindly, and are wise enough to seek for advice, I will tell you how and where to go. The water you seek springs from a well in an enchanted castle, and, that you may be able to reach it in safety, I will give you an iron wand and 2 little loaves of bread. Strike the iron door of the castle 3 times with the wand, and it will open. 2 hungry lions will be lying down inside, gaping for their prey. But if you throw them the bread, they will let you pass. Then hasten on to the well, and take some of the water of life before the clock strikes 12. For if you tarry longer, the door will shut upon you forever." Then the prince thanked his little friend with the scarlet cloak for his friendly aid, and took the wand and the bread, and went travelling on and on, over sea and over land, till he came to his journey's end, and found everything to be as the dwarf had told him. The door flew open at the 3rd stroke of the wand, and when the lions were quieted, he went on through the castle, and came at length to a beautiful hall. Around it he saw several knights sitting in a trance. Then he pulled off their rings, and put them on his own fingers. In another room he saw on a table a sword and a loaf of bread, which he also took. Further on he came to a room where a beautiful young lady sat upon a couch, and she welcomed him joyfully, and said if he would set her free from the spell that bound her, the kingdom should be his, if he would come back in a year and marry her. Then she told him that the well that held the water of life was in the palace gardens, and bade him make haste and draw what he wanted before the clock struck 12. He walked on, and as he walked through beautiful gardens, he came to a delightful shady spot in which stood a couch, and he thought to himself, as he felt tired, that he would rest himself for a while and gaze on the lovely scenes around him. So he laid himself down, and sleep fell upon him unawares, so that he did not wake up till the clock was striking 11:45. Then he sprang from the couch dreadfully frightened, ran to the well, filled a cup that was standing by him full of water, and hastened to get away in time. Just as he was going out of the iron door, it struck 12, and the door fell so quickly upon him that it snapped off a piece of his heel. When he found himself safe, he was overjoyed to think that he had got the water of life, and as he was going on his way homewards, he passed by the little dwarf, who, when he saw the sword and the loaf, said, "You have made a noble prize. With the sword you can at a blow slay whole armies, and the bread will never fail you." Then the prince thought to himself, "I cannot go home to my father without my brothers." So he said, "My dear friend, cannot you tell me where my 2 brothers are, who set out in search of the water of life before me, and never came back?" "I have shut them up by a charm between 2 mountains," said the dwarf. because they were proud and ill-behaved, and scorned to ask advice. The prince begged so hard for his brothers that the dwarf at last set them free, though unwillingly, saying, "Beware of them, for they have bad hearts." Their brother, however, was greatly rejoiced to see them, and told them all that had happened to him: how he had found the water of life, and had taken a cup full of it, and how he had set a beautiful princess free from a spell that bound her, and how she had engaged to wait a whole year, and then to marry him, and to give him the kingdom. Then they all three rode on together, and on their way home came to a country that was laid waste by war and a dreadful famine, so that it was feared all must die for want. But the prince gave the king of the land the bread, and all his kingdom ate of it. And he lent the king the wonderful sword, and he slew the enemy's army with it. And thus the kingdom was once more in peace and plenty. In the same manner he befriended 2 other countries, through which they passed on their way. When they came to the sea, they got into a ship, and during their voyage the 2 eldest said to themselves, "Our brother has got the water which we could not find. Therefore our father will forsake us and give him the kingdom, which is our right." So they were full of envy and revenge, and agreed together how they could ruin him. Then they waited till he was fast asleep, and poured the water of life out of the cup, and took it for themselves, giving him bitter sea-water instead. When they came to the journey's end, the youngest son brought his cup to the sick king, that he might drink and be healed. Scarcely, however, had he tasted the bitter sea-water, when he became worse even than he was before. And then both the elder sons came in, and blamed the youngest for what they had done, and said that he wanted to poison their father, but that they found the water of life, and had brought it with them. He no sooner began to drink of what they brought him, than he felt his sickness leave him, and was as strong and well as in his younger days. Then they went to their brother, and laughed at him, and said, "Well, brother, you found the water of life, did you? You have had the trouble, and we shall have the reward. Pray, with all your cleverness, why did not you manage to keep your eyes open? Next year one of us will take away your beautiful princess, if you do not care. You had better say nothing about this to our father, for he does not believe a word you say, and if you tell tales, you shall lose your life into the bargain. But be quiet, and we will let you off." The old king was still very angry with his youngest son, and thought he really meant to have taken away his life, so he called his court together, and asked what should be done. And all agreed that he ought to be put to death. The prince knew nothing of what was going on, till one day, when the king's chief huntsman went a-hunting with him, and they were alone in the wood together, the huntsman looked so sorrowful that the prince said, "My friend, what is the matter with you?" "I cannot and dare not tell you," said he. But the prince begged very hard, and said, "Only tell me what it is, and do not think I shall be angry, for I will forgive you." "Alas," said the huntsman, "the king has ordered me to shoot you." The prince started at this, and said, "Let me live, and I will change dresses with you. You shall take my royal coat to show to my father, and do you give me your shabby one." "With all my heart," said the huntsman. "I am sure I shall be glad to save you, for I could not have shot you." Then he took the prince's coat, and gave him the shabby one, and went away through the wood. Some time after, 3 grand embassies came to the old king's court, with rich gifts of gold and precious stones for his youngest son. Now all these were sent from the 3 kings to whom he had lent his sword and loaf of bread, in order to rid them of their enemy and feed their people. This touched the old king's heart, and he thought his son might still be guiltless, and said to his court, "Oh, that my son were still alive! How it grieves me that I had him killed!" "He is still alive," said the huntsman, "and I am glad that I had pity on him, but let him go in peace, and brought home his royal coat." At this the king was overwhelmed with joy, and made it known throughout all his kingdom that if his son would come back to his court, he would forgive him. Meanwhile the princess was eagerly waiting till her deliverer should come back, and had a road made leading up to her palace all of shining gold, and told her courtiers that whoever came on horseback and rode straight up to the gate upon it was her true lover, and that they must let him in. But whoever rode on one side of it they must be sure was not the right one, and that they must send him away at once. The time soon came when the eldest brother thought that he would make haste to go to the princess, and say that he was the one who had set her free, and that he should have her for his wife, and the kingdom with her. As he came before the palace and saw the golden road, he stopped to look at it, and thought to himself, "It is a pity to ride upon this beautiful road." So he turned aside and rode on the right-hand side of it. But when he came to the gate, the guards, who had seen the road he took, said to him he could not be what he said he was, and must go about his business. The second prince set out soon afterwards on the same errand. When he came to the golden road, and his horse had set one foot upon it, he stopped to look at it, and thought it very beautiful, and said to himself, "What a pity it is that any one should tread here." Then he too turned aside and rode on the left side of it. But when he came to the gate, the guard said that he was not the true prince, and that he too must go away about his business, and away he went. Now when the full year was come round, the third brother left the forest in which he had lain hid for fear of his father's anger, and set out in search of his betrothed bride. So he journeyed on, thinking of her all the way, and rode so quickly that he did not even see what the road was made of, but went with his horse straight over it, and as he came to the gate it flew open, and the princess welcomed him with joy, and said he was her deliverer, and should now be her husband and lord of the kingdom. When the first joy at their meeting was over, the princess told him she had heard of his father having forgiven him, and of his wish to have him home again. So before his wedding with the princess, he went to visit his father, taking her with him. Then he told him everything, how his brothers had cheated and robbed him, and yet that he had borne all those wrongs for the love of his father. And the old king was very angry, and wanted to punish his wicked sons. But they made their escape, and got into a ship and sailed away over the wide sea, and where they went to nobody knew and nobody cared. And now the old king gathered together his court, and asked all his kingdom to come and celebrate the wedding of his son and the princess. And young and old, noble and squire, gentle and simple, came at once on the summons, and among the rest came the friendly dwarf with the sugar-loaf hat, and a new scarlet cloak. And the wedding was held, and the merry bells rung, and all the good people they danced and they sung, and feasted and frolicked, I can't tell how long. End of The Water of Life. The 12 Huntsmen, from Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. There was once a king's son who had a bride whom he loved very much, and when he was sitting beside her and very happy, news came that his father lay sick unto death, and desired to see him once again before his end. Then he said to his beloved, "I must now go and leave you. I give you a ring as a remembrance of me. When I am king, I will return and fetch you." So he rode away, and when he reached his father, the latter was dangerously ill and near his death. He said to him, "Dear son, I wish to see you once again before my end. Promise me to marry as I wish." And he named a certain king's daughter who was to be his wife. the son was in such trouble that he did not think what he was doing, and said, "Yes, dear father, your will shall be done." And thereupon the king shut his eyes and died. When, therefore, the son had been proclaimed king, and the time of mourning was over, he was forced to keep the promise which he had given his father, and caused the king's daughter to be asked in marriage, and she was promised to him. His first betrothed heard of this, and fretted so much about his faithfulness that she nearly died. Then her father said to her, "Dearest child, why are you so sad? You shall have whatsoever you will." She thought for a moment, and said, "Dear father, I wish for 11 girls exactly like myself in face, figure, and size." The father said, "If it be possible, your desire shall be fulfilled." And he caused the search to be made in his whole kingdom, until 11 young maidens were found who exactly resembled his daughter in face, figure, and size. When they came to the king's daughter, she had 12 suits of huntsmen's clothes made, all alike, and the 11 maidens had to put on the huntsmen's clothes, and she herself put on the 12th suit. Thereupon she took her leave of her father, and rode away with them, and rode to the court of her former betrothed, whom she loved so dearly. Then she asked if he required any huntsmen, and if he would take all of them into his service. The king looked at her and did not know her, but as they were such handsome fellows, he said, "Yes," and that he would willingly take them. And now they were the king's 12 huntsmen. The king, however, had a lion which was a wondrous animal, for he knew all concealed and secret things. It came to pass that one evening he said to the king, "You think you have 12 huntsmen?" "Yes," said the king, "they are 12 huntsmen." The lion continued, "You are mistaken. They are 12 girls." The king said, "That cannot be true. How will you prove that to me?" "Oh, just let some peas be strewn in the antechamber," answered the lion, "and then you will soon see. Men have a firm step, and when they walk over peas none of them stir. But girls trip and skip and drag their feet, and the peas roll about." The king was well pleased with the counsel, and caused the peas to be strewn. There was, however, a servant of the king's who favored the huntsmen, and when he heard that they were going to be put to this test, he went to them and repeated everything, and said, "The lion wants to make the king believe that you are girls." Then the king's daughter thanked him, and said to her maidens, "Show some strength, and step firmly on the peas." So next morning, when the king had the 12 huntsmen called before him, and they came into the antechamber where the peas were lying, they stepped so firmly on them, and had such a strong, sure walk, that not one of the peas either rolled or stirred. Then they went away again, and the king said to the lion, "You have lied to me. They walk just like men." The lion said, "They have been informed that they were going to be put to the test, and have assumed some strength. Just let 12 spinning wheels be brought into the antechamber, and they will go to them and be pleased with them, and that is what no man would do." The king liked the advice, and had the spinning wheels placed in the antechamber. But the servant, who was well disposed to the huntsmen, went to them and disclosed the project. So when they were alone, the king's daughter said to her 11 girls, "Show some restraint, and do not look round at the spinning wheels." And the next morning, when the king had his 12 huntsmen summoned, she went through the antechamber and never once looked at the spinning wheels. Then the king again said to the lion, "You have deceived me. They are men, for they have not looked at the spinning wheels." The lion replied, "They have restrained themselves." The king, however, would no longer believe the lion. The 12 huntsmen always followed the king to the chase, and his liking for them continually increased. Now it came to pass that once, when they were out hunting, news came that the king's bride was approaching. When the true bride heard that, it hurt her so much that her heart was almost broken, and she fell fainting to the ground. The king thought something had happened to his dear huntsman, ran up to him, wanted to help him, and drew his glove off. Then he saw the ring which he had given to his first bride, and when he looked in her face, he recognized her. Then his heart was so touched that he kissed her, and when she opened her eyes, he said, "You are mine, and I am yours, and no one in the world can alter that." He sent a messenger to the other bride, and entreated her to return to her own kingdom, for he had a wife already, and someone who had just found an old key did not require a new one. Thereupon the wedding was celebrated, and the lion was again taken into favor, because, after all, he had told the truth. End of the 12 Huntsmen. The King of the Golden Mountain, from Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. There was once a merchant who had only one child, a son, that was very young and barely able to run alone. He had 2 richly laden ships then making a voyage upon the seas, in which he had embarked all his wealth in the hope of making great gains, when the news came that both were lost. Thus from being a rich man, he became all at once so very poor that nothing was left to him but one small plot of land, and there he often went in an evening to take his walk, and ease his mind of a little of his trouble. One day, as he was roaming along in a brown study, thinking with no great comfort on what he had been and what he now was, and was like to be, all on a sudden there stood before him a little rough-looking black dwarf. "Prithee, friend, why so sorrowful?" said he to the merchant. "What is it you take so deeply to heart?" "If you would do me any good, I would willingly tell you," said the merchant. "Who knows but I may?" said the little man. "Tell me what ails you, and perhaps you may find I may be of some use." Then the merchant told him how all his wealth was gone to the bottom of the sea, and how he had nothing left but that little plot of land. "Oh, trouble not yourself about that," said the dwarf. "Only undertake to bring me here 12 years hence whatever meets you first on your going home, and I will give you as much as you please." The merchant thought this was no great thing to ask, that it would most likely be his dog, or his cat, or something of that sort, but forgot his little boy, Heinel. So he agreed to the bargain, and signed and sealed the bond to do what was asked of him. But as he drew near home, his little boy was so glad to see him that he crept behind him, and laid fast hold of his legs, and looked up in his face and laughed. Then the father started, trembling with fear and horror, and saw what it was that he had bound himself to do. But as no gold was come, he made himself easy by thinking that it was only a joke that the dwarf was playing him, and that, at any rate, when the money came, he should see the bearer and would not take it in. About a month afterwards he went upstairs into a lumber room to look for some old iron, that he might sell it and raise a little money, and there, instead of his iron, he saw a large pile of gold lying on the floor. At the sight of this he was overjoyed, and forgetting all about his son, went into trade again and became a richer merchant than before. Meanwhile little Heinel grew up, and as the end of the 12 years drew near, the merchant began to call to mind his bond, and became very sad and thoughtful, so that care and sorrow were written upon his face. The boy one day asked what was the matter, but his father would not tell him for some time. At last, however, he said that he had, without knowing it, sold him for gold to a little ugly-looking black dwarf, and that the 12 years were coming round when he must keep his word. Then Heinel said, "Father, give yourself very little trouble about that. I shall be too much for the little man." When the time came, the father and son went out together to the place agreed upon, and the son drew a circle on the ground and set himself and his father in the middle of it. The little black dwarf soon came, and walked round and round about the circle, but could not find any way to get into it, and he either could not or dared not jump over it. At last the boy said to him, "Have you anything to say to us, my friend, or what do you want?" Now Heinel had found a friend in a good fairy that was fond of him, and had told him what to do, for this fairy knew what good luck was in store for him. "Have you brought me what you said you would?" said the dwarf to the merchant. The old man held his tongue, but Heinel said again, "What do you want here?" The dwarf said, "I come to talk with your father, not with you." "You have cheated and taken in my father," said the son. "Pray give him up his bond at once." "Fair and softly," said the little old man. "Right is right. I have paid my money, and your father has had it, and spent it. So be so good as to let me have what I paid it for." "You must have my consent to that first," said Heinel. "So please to step in here, and let us talk it over." The old man grinned and showed his teeth, as if he should have been very glad to get into the circle if he could. Then, at last, after a long talk, they came to terms. Heinel agreed that his father must give him up, and that so far the dwarf should have his way. But, on the other hand, the fairy had told Heinel what fortune was in store for him, if he followed his own course, and he did not choose to be given up to his hump-backed friend, who seemed so anxious for his company. So, to make a sort of drawn battle of the matter, it was settled that Heinel should be put into an open boat that lay on the seashore hard by, that the father should push him off with his own hand, and that he should thus be set adrift, and left to the bad or good luck of wind and weather. Then he took leave of his father, and set himself in the boat, but before it got far off, a wave struck it, and it fell with one side low in the water, so the merchant thought that poor Heinel was lost, and went home very sorrowful, while the dwarf went his way, thinking that at any rate he had had his revenge. The boat, however, did not sink, for the good fairy took care of her friend, and soon raised the boat up again, and it went safely on. The young man sat safe within, till at length it ran ashore upon an unknown land. As he jumped upon the shore, he saw before him a beautiful castle, but empty and dreary within, for it was enchanted. "Here," said he to himself, "must I find the prize the good fairy told me of." So he once more searched the whole palace through, till at last he found a white snake lying coiled up on a cushion in one of the chambers. Now the white snake was an enchanted princess, and she was very glad to see him, and said, "Are you at last come to set me free? 12 long years have I waited for the fairy to bring you hither as she promised, for you alone can save me. This night 12 men will come. Their faces will be black, and they will be dressed in chain armor. They will ask what you do here, but give no answer, and let them do what they will, beat, whip, pinch, prick, or torment you, bear all. Only speak not a word, and at 12 o'clock they must go away. The second night 12 others will come, and the third night 24, who will even cut off your head, but at the 12th hour of that night their power is gone, and I shall be free, and will come and bring you the water of life, and will wash you with it, and bring you back to life and health." And all came to pass as she had said. Heinel bore all, and spoke not a word. And the third night the princess came and fell on his neck and kissed him. Joy and gladness burst forth throughout the castle. The wedding was celebrated, and he was crowned king of the Golden Mountain. They lived together very happily, and the queen had a son. And thus 8 years had passed over their heads, when the king thought of his father, and began to long to see him once again. But the queen was against his going, and said, I know well what misfortunes will come upon us if you go." However, he gave her no rest till she agreed. At his going away she gave him a wishing ring, and said, "Take this ring and put it on your finger. Whatever you wish it will bring you. Only promise never to make use of it to bring me hence to your father's house." Then he said he would do what she asked, and put the ring on his finger, and wished himself near the town where his father lived. Heinel found himself at the gates in a moment, but the guards would not let him go in because he was so strangely clad. So he went up to a neighboring hill where a shepherd dwelt, and borrowed his old frock, and thus passed unknown into the town. When he came to his father's house, he said he was his son, but the merchant would not believe him, and said he had had but one son, his poor Heinel, who he knew was long since dead. And as he was only dressed like a poor shepherd, he would not even give him anything to eat. The king, however, still vowed that he was his son, and said, "Is there no mark by which you would know me if I am really your son?" "Yes," said his mother, "our Heinel had a mark like a raspberry on his right arm." Then he showed them the mark, and they knew that what he had said was true. He next told them how he was king of the Golden Mountain, and was married to a princess, and had a son 7 years old. But the merchant said, "That can never be true. He must be a fine king, truly, who travels about in a shepherd's frock." At this the son was vexed, and forgetting his word, turned his ring and wished for his queen and son. In an instant they stood before him. But the queen wept, and said he had broken his word, and bad luck would follow. He did all he could to soothe her, and she at last seemed to be appeased. But she was not so in truth, and was only thinking how she should punish him. One day he took her to walk with him out of the town, and showed her the spot where the boat was set adrift upon the wide waters. Then he sat himself down, and said, "I am very much tired. Sit by me. I will rest my head in your lap and sleep a while." As soon as he had fallen asleep, however, she drew the ring from his finger, and crept softly away, and wished herself and her son at home in their kingdom. And when he awoke, he found himself alone, and saw that the ring was gone from his finger. "I can never go back to my father's house," said he. "They would say I am a sorcerer. I will journey forth into the world till I come again to my kingdom." So saying, he set out and travelled, till he came to a hill where 3 giants were sharing their father's goods, and as they saw him pass they cried out and said, "Little men have sharp wits. He shall part the goods between us." Now there was a sword that cut off an enemy's head whenever the wearer gave the words, "Heads off," a cloak that made the owner invisible, or gave him any form he pleased, and a pair of boots that carried the wearer wherever he wished. Heinel said they must first let him try these wonderful things, then he might know how to set a value upon them. Then they gave him the cloak, and he wished himself a fly, and in a moment he was a fly. "The cloak is very well," said he. "Now give me the sword." "No," said they, "not unless you undertake not to say 'heads off,' for if you do, we are all dead men." So they gave it to him, charging him to try it on a tree. The wedding of Mrs. Fox. He next asked for the boots from Grimm's also, Fairy Tales, and the moment he had all 3 in his power, he wished himself at the Golden Mountain. There he was at once. So the giants were left behind with no goods to share or quarrel about. As Heinel came near his castle, he heard the sound of merry music, and the people around told him that his queen was about to marry another husband. Then he threw his cloak around him, and passed through the castle hall, and placed himself by the side of the queen, where no one saw him. But when anything to eat was put upon her plate, he took it away and ate it himself, and when a glass of wine was handed to her, he took it and drank it, and thus, though they kept on giving her meat and drink, Her plate and cup were always empty. Upon this, fear and remorse came over her, and she went into her chamber alone, and sat there weeping, and he followed her there. "Alas!" she said to herself, "was I not once set free? Why then does this enchantment still seem to bind me?" "False and fickle one," said he, "one indeed came who set thee free, and he is now near thee again. But how have you used him? Ought he to have had such a treatment from thee?" Then he went out and sent away the company, and said the wedding was at an end, for that he was come back to the kingdom. But the princes, peers, and great men mocked at him. However, he would enter into no parley with them, but only asked them if they would go in peace or not. Then they turned upon him, and tried to seize him, but he drew his sword. "Heads off!" cried he, and with the word the traitors' heads fell before him, and Heinel was once more king of the Golden Mountain. End of The King of the Golden Mountain. Dr. Knowall, from Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. There was once upon a time a poor peasant called Crab, who drove with 2 oxen a load of wood to the town and sold it to a doctor for 2 thalers. When the money was being counted out to him, it so happened that the doctor was sitting at table, and when the peasant saw how well he ate and drank, his heart desired what he saw, and would willingly have been a doctor too. So he remained standing a while, and at length inquired if he too could not be a doctor. "Oh, yes," said the doctor, "that is soon managed." "What must I do?" asked the peasant. "In the first place, buy yourself an ABC book of the kind which has a rooster on the frontispiece. In the second, turn your cart and your 2 oxen into money, and get yourself some clothes, and whatsoever else pertains to medicine. Thirdly, have a sign painted for yourself with the words, 'I am Dr. Knowall,' and have that nailed up above your house door." The peasant did everything that he had been told to do. When he had doctored people a while, but not long, a rich and great lord had some money stolen. Then he was told about Dr. Knowall, who lived in such and such a village, and must know what had become of the money. So the lord had the horses harnessed to his carriage, drove out to the village, and asked Crab if he were Dr. Knowall. Yes, he was, he said. Then he was to go with him and bring back the stolen money. "Oh, yes, but Greta, my wife, must go too." The lord was willing, and let both of them have a seat in the carriage, and they all drove away together. When they came to the nobleman's castle, the table was spread, and Crab was told to sit down and eat. "Yes, but my wife Greta too," said he, and he seated himself with her at the table. And when the first servant came with a dish of delicate fare, the peasant nudged his wife and said, "Greta, that was the first," meaning that was the servant who brought the first dish. The servant, however, thought he intended by that to say, "That is the first thief," and as he actually was so, he was terrified, and said to his comrade outside, "The doctor knows all. We shall fare ill. He said I was the first." The second did not want to go in at all, but was forced. So when he went in with his dish, the peasant nudged his wife and said, "Greta, that is the second." This servant was equally alarmed, and he got out as fast as he could. The third fared no better, for the peasant again said, "Greta, that is the third." The fourth had to carry in a dish that was covered, and the lord told the doctor that he was to show his skill and guess what was beneath the cover. Actually, they were crabs. The doctor looked at the dish, had no idea what to say, and cried, "Ah, poor crab!" When the lord heard that, he cried, "There, he knows it. He must also know who has the money." On this the servants looked terribly uneasy, and made a sign to the doctor that they wished him to step outside for a moment. When, therefore, he went out, all four of them confessed to him that they had stolen the money, and said that they would willingly restore it, and give him a heavy sum into the bargain, if he would not denounce them, for if he did, they would be hanged. They led him to the spot where the money was concealed. With this the doctor was satisfied, and returned to the hall, sat down at the table, and said, "My lord, now will I search in my book where the gold is hidden." The fifth servant, however, crept into the stove to hear if the doctor knew still more. But the doctor sat still and opened his ABC book, turned the pages backwards and forwards, and looked for the rooster. As he could not find it immediately, he said, "I know you are there, so you had better come out." Then the fellow in the stove thought the doctor meant him, and full of terror sprang out, crying, "That man knows everything." Then Dr. Knowall showed the lord where the money was, but did not say who had stolen it, and received from both sides much money in reward, and became a renowned man. End of Dr. Knowall. The Seven Ravens, from Grimm's Fairy Tales, by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. There once was a man who had 7 sons, and last of all 1 daughter. Although the little girl was very pretty, she was so weak and small that they thought she could not live, but they said she should at once be christened. So the father sent one of his sons in haste to the spring to get some water, but the other 6 ran with him. Each wanted to be first at drawing the water, and so they were in such a hurry that all their pitchers fell into the well, and they stood very foolishly looking at one another, and did not know what to do, for no one dared go home. In the meantime the father was uneasy, and could not tell what made the young man stay so long. "Surely," said he, "the whole 7 must have forgotten themselves over some game of play." And when he had waited still longer, and they yet did not come, he flew into a rage, and wished them all turned into ravens. Scarcely had he spoken these words, when he heard a croaking over his head, and looked up and saw 7 ravens as black as coal flying round and round. Sorry as he was to see his wish so fulfilled, he did not know how what was done could be undone, and comforted himself as well as he could for the loss of his 7 sons with his dear little daughter, who soon became stronger and every day more beautiful. For a long time she did not know that she had ever had any brothers, for her father and mother took care not to speak of them before her. But on one day, by chance, she heard the people about her speak of them. "Yes," said they, "she is beautiful indeed, but still 'tis a pity that her brothers should have been lost for her sake." Then she was much grieved, and went to her father and mother, and asked if she had any brothers, and what had become of them. So they dared no longer hide the truth from her, but said it was all the will of heaven, and that her birth was only the innocent cause of it. But the little girl mourned sadly about it every day, and thought herself bound to do all she could to bring her brothers back. And she had neither rest nor ease, till at length one day she stole away, and set out into the wide world to find her brothers, wherever they might be, and free them, whatever it might cost her. She took nothing with her but a little ring which her father and mother had given her, a loaf of bread in case she should be hungry, a little pitcher of water in case she should be thirsty, and a little stool to rest upon when she should be weary. Thus she went on, and journeyed till she came to the world's end. Then she came to the sun, but the sun looked much too hot and fiery. So she ran away quickly to the moon, but the moon was cold and chilly, and said, "I smell flesh and blood this way." So she took herself away in a hurry, and came to the stars, and the stars were friendly and kind to her, and each star sat upon his own little stool. But the morning star rose up and gave her a little piece of wood, and said, "If you have not this little piece of wood, you cannot unlock the castle that stands on the glass mountain, and there your brothers live." The little girl took the piece of wood, rolled it up in a little cloth, and went on again, until she came to the glass mountain and found the door shut. Then she felt for the little piece of wood, but when she unwrapped the cloth it was not there, and she saw she had lost the gift of the good stars. What was to be done? She wanted to save her brothers, and had no key of the castle of the glass mountain. So this faithful little sister took a knife out of her pocket, and cut off her little finger, that was just the size of the piece of wood she had lost, and put it in the door and opened it. As she went in, a little dwarf came up to her and said, "What are you seeking for?" "I seek for my brothers, the 7 ravens," answered she. Then the dwarf said, "My masters are not at home, but if you will wait till they come, pray step in." Now the little dwarf was getting their dinner ready, and he brought their food upon 7 little plates, and their drink in 7 little glasses, and set them upon the table, and out of each little plate their sister ate a small piece, and out of each little glass she drank a small drop. But she let the ring that she had brought with her fall into the last glass. On a sudden she heard a fluttering and croaking in the air, and the dwarf said, "Here come my masters." When they came in, they wanted to eat and drink, and looked for their little plates and glasses. Then said one after the other, "Who has eaten from my little plate, and who has been drinking out of my little glass? Caw, caw, well I ween, mortal lips have this way been." When the 7th came to the bottom of his glass, and found there the ring, he looked at it, and knew that it was his father's and mother's, and said, "Oh, that our little sister would but come! Then we should be free." When the little girl heard this, for she stood behind the door all the time and listened, she ran forward, and in an instant all the ravens took their right form again, and all hugged and kissed each other, and went merrily home. End of the 7 Ravens. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm. Translated by Edgar Taylor and Marion Edwards. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Bob Neufeld. First story. There was once upon a time an old fox with 9 tails, who believed that his wife was not faithful to him, and wished to put her to the test. He stretched himself out under the bench, did not move a limb, and behaved as if he were stone dead. Mrs. Fox went up to her room, shut herself in, and her maid, Miss Cat, sat by the fire and did the cooking. When it became known that the old fox was dead, suitors presented themselves. The maid heard someone standing at the house door, knocking. She went and opened it, and it was a young fox, who said, "What may you be about, Miss Cat? Do you sleep or do you wake?" She answered, "I am not sleeping, I am waking. Would you know what I am making? I am boiling warm beer with butter. Will you be my guest for supper?" "No, thank you, miss," said the fox. "What is Mrs. Fox doing?" The maid replied, "She is sitting in her room, moaning in her gloom, weeping her little eyes quite red because old Mr. Fox is dead." "Do just tell her, miss, that a young fox is here, who would like to woo her." "Certainly, young sir." The cat goes up the stairs, trip, trip. The door she knocks at, tap, tap, tap. "Mistress Fox, are you inside?" "Oh, yes, my dear cat," she cried. "A wooer, he stands at the door out there." What does he look like, my dear? Has he 9 as beautiful tails as the late Mr. Fox? Oh, no, answered the cat. He has only 1. Then I will not have him. Miss Cat went downstairs and sent the wooer away. Soon afterwards there was another knock, and another fox was at the door who wished to woo Mrs. Fox. He had 2 tails, but he did not fare better than the first. After this still more came, each with 1 tail more than the other, but they were all turned down, until at last one came who had 9 tails, like old Mr. Fox. When the widow heard that, she said joyfully to the cat, "Now open the gates and doors all wide, and carry old Mr. Fox outside." But just as the wedding was going to be solemnized, old Mr. Fox stirred under the bench, and cudgelled all the rabble, and drove them and Mrs. Fox out of the house. Second story. When old Mr. Fox was dead, the wolf came as a suitor, and knocked at the door, and the cat, who was a servant to Mrs. Fox, opened it for him. The wolf greeted her, and said, "Good day, Mrs. Cat of Carrowit. How comes it that alone you sit? What are you making good?" The cat replied, "In milk I'm breaking bread, so sweet. Will you be my guest and eat?" "No, thank you, Mrs. Cat," answered the wolf. "Is Mrs. Fox not at home?" The cat said, "She sits upstairs in her room, bewailing her sorrowful doom, bewailing her trouble so sore, for old Mr. Fox is no more." The wolf answered, "If she's in want of a husband new, then will it please her to step below?" The cat runs quickly up the stair, and lets her tail fly here and there, until she comes to the parlor door. With her 5 gold rings at the door she knocks. "Are you within, good Mistress Fox? If you're in want of a husband now, then will it please you to step below?" Mrs. Fox answered, "Has the gentleman red stockings on, and has he a pointed mouth?" "No," answered the cat. "Then he won't do for me." When the wolf was gone, came a dog, a stag, a hare, a bear, a lion, and all the beasts of the field, one after the other. But one of the good qualities which old Mr. Fox had possessed was always lacking, and the cat had continually to send the suitors away. At length came a young fox, and Mrs. Fox said, "Has the gentleman red stockings on, and has a little pointed mouth?" "Yes," said the cat, "he has." "Then let him come upstairs," said Mrs. Fox, and ordered the servant to prepare the wedding feast. "Sweep me the room as clean as you can. Up with the window, fling out my old man. For many a fine fat mouse he brought, yet of his wife he never thought, but ate up every one he caught." Then the wedding was solemnized with young Mr. Fox, and there was much rejoicing and dancing, and if they have not left off, they are dancing still. End of the wedding of Mrs. Fox.
So that's it. Interesting stories. Like, it's always so doom and gloom. Like, how did even Disney get such good stories out of it? Because this is like so dark. But that's okay. That's the way it is. I think I just sissed. Um. So next time it'll be Sunday, and we'll go with 57 to 63 to finish off the Grimm fairy tales. Yeah, so that's where we'll get for now. Thanks for joining me, anybody who came by. I appreciate it, and I hope you have a wonderful night. And Steven, I hope the spaghetti's turning out wonderful. Yummy. And I'll talk to you later.